Blast. Welcome, friends. This is Martin Comtois, MC Starman, with my friend Luke Renda. How you doing, Luke?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm hanging in there.
Hanging in there. We're doing C.J. Jung's The Undiscovered Self. We're in the last chapter, and that last chapter is really the kicker, really, I think, the conclusion, and it's a short one, lots of loaded stuff. It has my favorite quote, one of my favorite Jung quotes on it, so we'll get to study that. And I hope that you've been enjoying this whole series with us. It's kind of interesting that we're coming to the end. What's been your experience? How you been enjoying this, Luke?
It's been pretty good, actually. It's been fun having someone else to talk to about this, and if anyone's been following along from the beginning, they're probably really seeing how important this essay is for our time, and it's very appropriate, and I think we could learn a lot from this essay. I mean, I think I've probably read it 5 or 6 times now, and it's probably one of the most important things for people to be aware of, is the psychological dynamic here. So
yes, I've been reading from The Secret of the Golden Flower, and The Secret of the Golden Flower seems like a really good follow-up on it. I don't know if you read those essays, but very similar to this in terms of speaking of what's going on with in our collective, and it's both, far removed, and that is written in the 50s, but also so applicable to what we're going through right now. And so, yeah, it's, Jung's material is really useful in our times. And so, yeah, we'll have to decide, what we're going to do next, if we're going to do something, but also the second half of the book, the symbols and interpretation of dreams, I was looking through that, and that's really exciting too. So lots of material to cover.
Yeah, Wotan. I was just checking in on Wotan there the other day, and it's like, holy smokes, is that ever an eye-opener for nowadays too? There's a few good lines in that one.
Oh yeah, do you have volume 10 of the collected works then?
Yeah, that's what I got here.
Oh man, that's a gold volume. That's gold. Really, that's fun. Yeah, we could read that too.
Yeah, it's a short one too. We could do just even a few quotes from it sometime.
There's and then there's some actually there's a really nice book. Anyway, we got to get into the work here. But we can talk a lot. Let's do the essay, and then we can chat after, so our viewers are not being left hanging.
Yeah.
All right. So the meaning of self-knowledge, that's chapter 7 of The Undiscovered Self. What our age thinks of as the shadow, an inferior part of the psyche, contains more than something merely negative. The very fact that through self-knowledge, that is, by exploring our own souls, we come upon the instincts and their world of imagery, should throw some light on the powers slumbering in the psyche, of which we are seldom aware so long as all goes well. They are potentialities of the greatest dynamism, and it depends entirely on the preparedness and attitude of the conscious mind, whether the eruptions of these forces, and by these forces, he means the archetypes, so the forces that inhabit the unconscious, and the images and ideas associated with them will tend towards construction or catastrophe. The psychologist seems to be the only person who knows from experience how precarious the psychic preparedness of modern man is. For he is the only one who sees himself compelled to seek out in man's own nature those helpful powers and ideas which over and over enabled him to find the right way through darkness and danger. I'll repeat that sentence. The psychologist seems to be the only person who knows from experience how precarious the psychic preparedness of modern man is. For he is the only one who sees himself compelled to seek out in man's own nature those helpful powers and ideas which over and over have enabled him to find the right way through darkness and danger. For this exacting work, the psychologist requires all of his patience. He may not rely on any traditional oughts and musts, leaving the other person to make all the effort and contenting himself with the easy role of advisor and admonisher. Everyone knows the futility of preaching about things that are desirable, yet the general helplessness in this situation is so great that the need so dire that one prefers to repeat the old mistake instead of racking one's brains over a subjective problem. Besides, it is always a question of treating one single individual only and not 10,000. When the trouble one takes would ostensibly have more impressive results, though one knows well enough that nothing has happened at all unless the individual changes. So he talks about, we lost you there for a while. You're back?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
The internet world, but he's talking about facing the shadow and how the psychologist's job is to help people, and that just what he talks about, just to be an advisor and an admonisher is not enough. One actually has to feel the pain of his client. And of course, when he talks about the psychologist, he doesn't talk about the modern psychologist. He talks about the healer of the soul, and Jung, his definition of psychology and the psychologist was much more profound than what we see today as the pill pusher. The psychologists need to be able to understand his client and to understand his neurosis and to help him through. It's a very difficult challenge, and that nothing has been done unless the individual changes, and so, when you're helping somebody, you can be in love with, thinking that you're doing real good work, but really when it comes down to it, if the person doesn't change, if the person doesn't get it and starts changing, then you haven't done anything.
Well, it's the same with the collective. Unless you change the individuals in the collective, it doesn't matter. Right?
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Want to go to the next paragraph?
Sure, I'll do this one. Technical difficulties kind of threw me off, but here we go. The effect on all individuals, which one would like to see realized, may not set in for hundreds of years, for the spiritual transformation of mankind follows the slow tread of the centuries and cannot be hurried or held up by any rational process of reflection, let alone brought to fruition in one generation. What does lie within our reach, however, is the change in individuals who have or create for themselves an opportunity to influence others of like mind. I do not mean by persuading or preaching. I am thinking rather of the well-known fact that anyone who has insight into his own actions and has thus found access to the unconscious involuntarily exercises an influence on his environment. The deepening and broadening of his consciousness produce the kind of effect which the primitives call mana. It is an unintentional influence on the unconscious of others, a sort of unconscious prestige, and its effects last only so long as it is not disturbed by conscious intentions.
Wow, far out, huh?
Mhm.
The individual and change is possible, but to actually see changes in the collective, Jung says it's going to take hundreds of years, and we have a popular belief that we're at the door of the new age and that we're going to have a mass enlightenment. Well, that takes a long time to actually happen, and we're really far away from that. And further on in the essay, he makes the same point. And then for those who actually do the work of becoming, more conscious of the unconscious and integrate the unconscious, then they have this mana, there's a, and as healers and as, workers in this art, we are invited to develop this mana through our own practice. And it is this mana, this psychological effect that we have by walking our talk and doing the work of facing the unconscious and facing the shadow. In a sense, that is what has an influence on our clients and the people that we work with. And so really, it's essential that one does the work in order to have an effect on others. Yeah.
Agreed.
Nor is the striving for self-knowledge altogether without prospects of success, since there exists a factor which, though completely disregarded, meets our expectations halfway. This is the unconscious zeitgeist. It compensates the attitude of the conscious mind and anticipates changes to come. An excellent example of this is modern art. Though seeming to deal with aesthetic problems, it is really performing a work of psychological education on the public by breaking down and destroying their previous aesthetic views of what is beautiful in form and meaningful in content. The pleasingness of the artistic product is replaced by chill abstractions of the most subjective nature, which brusquely slams the door on the naive and romantic delight in the senses and on the obligatory love for the object. This tells us in plain and universal language that the prophetic spirit of art has turned away from the old object relationships toward for the time being, dark chaos of subjectivisms. Certainly art, so far as we can judge of it, has not yet discovered in this darkness what it is that could hold all men together and give expression to their psychic wholeness. Since reflection seems to be needed for this purpose, it may be that such discoveries are reserved for other fields of endeavor.
I'll just continue on here, I think.
Well, I think it's important to talk about the zeitgeist. And so it's, when we do work with an individual, the effect of the zeitgeist, the zeitgeist translated in English means the spirit of our times. And so in analysis and in self-work, and the psychologist, the healer, the healer of the soul, is always confronted not only with the problems that the individual has, and also his own problem, but also with the problem that resides in our times. You can't separate the individual from his times. And the spirit of our times kind of announces the changes, so that really in analysis and in healing work, you can never discount the effect of the collective zeitgeist. And in this next chapter that you'll read here, paragraph that you'll read here, he really gets into what that zeitgeist is. And then he talks about art. And And I had a comment that I was preparing for that. Of course, Jung is writing this, when modern art is really wild, in the 50s, and what was going on at that time in art was quite shocking. And so he comments on that, but then we can see in our collective evolution, the rise of what we call magic realism, really beautiful artists that have developed this style of magical realism, and what that looks like, and we see magical realism to become more and more a form of art, which really shows the evolution of the human experience, and the magical symbolism that has been transporting itself through art. um, um, and so, yeah, it bodes well. But go ahead.
Great art till now has always derived its fruitfulness from myth, from the unconscious process of symbolization, which continues through the ages and, as a primordial manifestation of the human spirit, will continue to be the root of all creation in the future. The development of modern art, with its seemingly nihilistic trends towards disintegration, must be understood as the symptom and symbol of a mood of universal destruction and renewal that has set its mark on our age. This mood makes itself felt everywhere, politically, socially, and philosophically. We are living in what the Greeks called the kairos, the right moment for a metamorphosis of the gods, of the fundamental principle and symbols. This peculiarity of our time, which is certainly not of our own conscious choosing, is the expression of the unconscious man within us who is changing. Coming generations will have to take account of this moment, of this momentous transformation, if humanity is not to destroy itself through the might of its own technology and science. The changing of the archetypes and the changing of the inner man. Pretty interesting how it's kind of like, you may not, the way he talks about the art and stuff. I think he gets into it a bit later, but it's very interesting how you kind of need that to contrast with things of the past, and to just see the transformation, right? You wouldn't know how much, like with heavy metal music, you wouldn't know how beautiful classical music if you didn't have the comparison of the loud form of it. It's kind of interesting.
Right. He speaks of the kairos. Kairos is the magical time. And there's another quote in volume 10 of the collected works, in his introduction to his essays on flying saucers, where Jung talks about this in more detail. He talks about the shifting of age and the ages, from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, and he goes back a few ages, and he talks about the changes that happen and the shift in he calls them psychic dominance or archetypal dominance, or a metamorphosis. Here calls it the metamorphosis of the gods. And so the inner man is changing, and I think that that's really, like what he says, if man is to not destroy himself, which is what we're saying, we're kind of destroying ourselves with the might of our technology and science. And if man is not to destroy himself with his technology and science, the way he's destroying the earth, then he has to take a notice of this inner being within him. And I think that that's the cause of so much psychological disruptions in people right now, is because, this mental health and spiritual health crisis is because we are deeply changing within ourselves. Our definitions, like we're confronted with really deep issues of how do we interrelate with the opposite sex? How do we interrelate with colonialism and the great suffering that was caused to First Nation people, and this European colonial spirit that gives us right to control others and to force our will upon others because we're more powerful than they are. This colonial spirit, it's shifting within us. The inner man is shifting. We're becoming different, and yet we are having to face the sins of our ancestors, and so that's really difficult. And it causes all kinds of psychological turmoils. And so that's what Jung says, that in understanding the psychological work that you do with clients, you have to understand the zeitgeist. You have to understand the spirit of our times, and that the deep human being within us, the eternal within us, is shifting. It's moving into a system of values that is different. We're moving into another age. We're moving into the age of Aquarius. By the way, Jung was the first one to speak of the age of Aquarius. So from the astrological perspective, Jung was kind of a prophet in that way, and helped us, prepare ourselves and understand what that great shift is. And so this quote is really quite important. My turn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, next chapter, next paragraph. As at the beginning of the Christian era, so again today, we are faced with the problem of the general moral backwardness, which has failed to keep pace with our scientific, technical, and social progress. So much is at stake, and so much depends on the psychological constitution of modern man. Is he capable of resisting the temptation to use his power for the purpose of staging a world conflagration? Is he conscious of the path he is treading, and what the conclusions are that must be drawn from the present world situation and his own psychic situation? Does he know what he is on the point of losing, the life-preserving myth of the inner man, which Christianity has treasured up for him? Does he realize what lies in store should this catastrophe ever befall him? Is he even capable of realizing that this would in fact be a catastrophe? And finally, does the individual know that he is the make weight that tips the scales?
Yeah, I like that part. Does he even realize it's a catastrophe? Like, this is what we're dealing with.
And the deep realization, go ahead.
Oh, it's just, when the catastrophe is happening, people are running around thinking it's all fine and dandy.
Well, yeah,
the colonization of the mind.
The colonization of the mind, but also the losing of the understanding of what Christianity provided us. Christianity provided us with the myth of the inner man. So the myth of the inner man. That's so what is that? The inner man, and we have lost connection with what, with that spirit, with that, that divine being within us. And we don't even realize, but in essence, that's why we're so crazy in these days, is because we've lost that connection.
Well, that's like almost like the scientific materialistic thinking. See, like back when Jung was writing this, they were very worried about the atom bomb dropping.
Right.
We're not so much worried about that anymore, but it's the mental, like the psychological materialism and the psychological scientism. It's not even science. The science is fine. It's the mental side of that scientific thinking that's totally destroying our world. And that's, we are changing. We are changing right now. And that is probably why there's so much emphasis on scientific thinking right now. It's like they're just like, hey, we're trying to come into this more subjective, this isn't working for me, and they just keep pushing science and statistics and all this other crap on you. And it's like, that's like, it's like they're hanging on by their fingernails, and that's why they have to push this stuff so hard, because their world's falling apart and they have to take everybody else with them.
Well, I think that whether they're planning on it or not, I think like you're right, they're just grasping onto whatever they can. It's the age of the control freak, who is so insecure within himself and so disconnected from spirit that he grasps at anything to hold on to this old value. And in that sense, it's really quite pathetic to witness, huh?
Yeah, well, and Jung talks about it in Wotan. Liz Green talks about it in her works, and Alice Miller talks about it in her psychological works. And it's like, yeah, they may not be conscious of it, they're still doing it.
Absolutely.
So some people are conscious of it. It's obvious that they're conscious of it, but a great majority of people are, it's unconscious forces rising up within them that are, it's insane to watch, honestly. From studying this previously to actually watching it happen in the world, it's completely mind-boggling.
Well, it's akin to what, it's akin to what we used to talk about in terms of possession. The modern man is possessed, just like when Jung talked about the Germanic people being possessed by Wotan during World War II. So we're possessed by some spirit, that I guess Nietzsche talked about it too, and Goethe talked about it in Faust as well. But there's a real need for us to redefine what that spirit is, and I think that that's why we're all struggling so hard to redefine what spirituality is, because we've lost that completely.
Well, that's
And
why it's kind of so chaotic, because we still haven't found the new definitions. We're still
right.
searching for that right now. So, shall I continue?
Yep.
Happiness and contentment, equability of mind, and meaningfulness of life. These can be experienced only by the individual and not by a state, which on the one hand is nothing but a convention agreed to by independent individuals, and on the other, continually threatens to paralyze and suppress the individual. The psychiatrist is one of those who know most about the conditions of the soul's welfare, upon which so infinitely much depends in the social sum. The social and political circumstances of the time are certainly of considerable significance, but their importance for the weal or woe of the individual has been boundlessly overestimated in so far as they are taken for the sole deciding factors. In this respect, all our social goals commit the error of overlooking the psychology of the person for whom they are intended, and very often of promoting only his illusions.
Wow.
I like that part. The social and political circumstances of the time are certainly of considerable significance, but their importance for the weal or woe of the individual has been boundlessly overestimated. That's the whole point of all this, shoring yourself up as an individual. Then it's the social and political factors won't matter as much, right?
Yeah.
If you're not an individual and you're basically basing all your decisions on social and political factors, you're underestimated the psyche.
And again, I think that what keeps coming up for me is, what Jung defined as the psychologist and the psychiatrist, and the aim of the psychiatrist and the psychologist from a Jungian perspective. It is the healer of the soul, psyche being the soul. So psyche, psychologist, psychiatrist are people who are interested in saving the soul, but our modern psychology is so far from that. So then our listeners, we're also, and I was having this discussion with a friend of mine, that we're in the process of redefining what psychology is, and that's one part of our crisis, is that we kind of, our psychology has become completely controlled by the pharmaceuticals and by pharmaceuticals agenda. And we have to reclaim psychology, just as we have to reclaim um, um, spirituality from archaic, patterns and collective patterns. This requires a tremendous amount of courage on our part to redefine psyche, and that's what Jung talks about in terms of the inner man. So for him, the Christian mythos and um, the the myth of the psychologist, from his point of view, are related. They're not so much as related as they are the same thing. And so we're looking at the synthesis of psychology and spirituality, and that's really, part of the point of this rebirth that we're going through. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, for sure. There's actually a great book by Bruno Bettelheim, and it's all the original translations of Freud's work, and it's called Freud and Man's Soul. And what he talks about in that is how basically through mistranslation, all of Freud's work was taken, they took the soul out of Freud's work. Because when I read this Bettelheim book, the translations from Freud's work, it's deeply spiritual. That's why he chose the word psychology. He meant it as soul doctor. And it's weird how it's like through the time, it's just been changed completely to be materialistic. And not only is the pharmaceutical companies taken over psychology, they've taken over our whole world.
Absolutely.
Anyone has watch the news. They've taken over our whole world, our
Absolutely.
politicians, our media. But they took over psychology first. That's the groundwork that needed to be laid before they could take over everything else.
And killed, the influence of myth, and and devalued spirituality, and then owned up, and so what we used to talk about, we used to talk about the military industrial complex, and then now we're, and how horrible that was, and how much suffering that caused, and now we have a pharmaceutical industrial complex, which is probably the same people, really. And so we have a lot of work to do to regain control of psyche, for sure. I'll read the last paragraph here and we can continue.
Yeah.
I hope, therefore, that a psychiatrist who, in the course of a long life, has devoted himself to the causes and consequences of psychic disorders, may be permitted to express his opinion in all the modesty enjoined upon him as an individual about the question raised by the world situation today. I am neither spurred on by excessive optimism, nor in love with high ideals, but am merely concerned with the fate of the individual human being, that infinitesimal unit on whom a world depends, and in whom, if we read the meaning of the Christian message aright, even God seeks his goal. You read things like that when Jung becomes so vulnerable and so humble, and this is what really has, gotten me to fall in love with Jung, is his humility and his vulnerability. Here as a psychiatrist, I hope that I can say something about these world situation, because really my concern is for the suffering of the individual. And so if I have to something to say about, the collective, it's because of that, because of my commitment. And Jung spent 60 years in practice working with individuals, and he was so committed. And then he talks about, and he makes a point that is really present, and especially in Eon, but in other more of his intimate work. He talks about how God is invested in the human experience, what we are going through as individuals and finding ourselves and becoming what we call self-realized or individuated. God is invested in that because God realizes himself through our realization of our own inner self. And so that self-realization is God realization, and that God redefines himself through that process. And that really, makes Jung so different than others. One, he's not sectarian, he's not advising a particular spiritual path, but he's advising that we, in our own, take the path of understanding the inner self, that we take it up in our own individual way. And that's what his work was, to support us as individuals in the process of individuation. So, and so in that sense, Jung was a scientist, but also a spiritualist and also a psychologist, but in the true sense of the word.
Well, and he was influenced by Jacob Boehm and Meister Eckhart and Schelling and guys like that, right? Who preached the same thing back in the 1600s. I think it's called dialectical monism, whereas like God creates these like compartmentalized units of consciousness so that they can learn and grow, because it's the only way that God can learn and grow.
Exactly. And based in the Paracelsus, and alchemical ideas, and his study in Gnostic philosophy, and his studies of the Greeks and and the Latin, and Jung's roots go really deep into the basis of the human experience, and so studying Jung is a very deeply rewarding effort, because it connects you with so many vibrant and mystics, and yeah, I think we're definitely making some progress. How did you feel about this whole experience of reading the Undiscovered Self together?
Yeah, it was great. It was provided a lot of new perspectives on it, and just deepening my understanding of the whole essay itself, and then getting more perspective on Jung as well.
and, and and like you were mentioning, the dialectic approach, two individuals working on it, I think that was really rewarding for me, and to be able to discuss this and to express my ideas, but to also listen to yours, but to also kind of have a more objective view, and a more concentrated effort on studying Jung in this. So I hope that I don't know how it is for those who are listening to us, but I hope that this is that we're not just having too many digressions, and that you're benefiting from that. That's really important. And I don't know about yourself, but I think that we should do more. And we'll discuss that. And I really want to do the next the next part of the book, but because that deals with dream analysis, which is Jung's principal method of psychological analysis. And so I think that that's really important for my clients and for myself as well. What do you think is next for us, Luke?
Yeah, something like that would be good to start in the new year, maybe, and kind of see where it goes from there. It's kind of because we have a dialectical approach with me and you coming from our different opinions, but we also have like this third party, which is the viewers, that kind of help us sort of break it down and presented in a certain way as well, right? Rather than us two just discussing it. So we have to think about the viewers. And so that kind of further refines what we're doing, I think.
And just like Jung was saying earlier, in this essay, if the viewer is not affected, if it doesn't work for you, then this isn't working. And so it's really important. And so then we kind of depend on you. And so if you have other essays that you would like us to go through, I know I've been reading Jung's alchemical work recently, and there's a number of little essays that I'm thinking that are short that would be really good, maybe 1 or 2 videos. This one here, symbols and an interpretation of dreams, is about 25, 30 pages longer than the one we just covered. So it would take a little bit longer, but Jung really gets into the depth of his techniques on dream analysis and how to work with dreams. And so I think that that's really invaluable. And so if you're into it, I would love to jump into that, but we can talk about it and we'll let you guys all know. So I think we're basically wanting more input from you guys and how this was for you. And, there's how many episodes do we have?
I think 8 or 9, maybe.
And so that's quite a bit of material. So I think that anybody who wants to go through all of that material is pretty dedicated. So I would, encourage you to get the book itself. And anything in closing, Luke?
No, it's I've got some comments on my channel that people seem to be liking it, and so that's a good sign.
Indeed. It seems like things were a little bit busier for you in this last, you got more views this time and your channel is growing?
I got a few more views on the last video, and I got two random people that kind of came in that commented, because I guess it was they're reading the Undiscovered Self, and one of the first videos that came up was our video, and so they commented on it and said it was pretty helpful. And then we have Carol, who comments on all the videos, so we know it's helping one person.
Yes, I got another friend, Jeremy, who's starting to comment mostly on the astrological stuff. So seems like it's slow growing, but it's growing. And so we just have to follow the process. I think also it has a lot to do with the time of the year. People are in the month of Sagittarius, people are really busy and the holidays are coming up, and there's the darkest time of the year and solstice. And I think in wintertime there, people will have more time, and hopefully people will look at the series more.
Yeah, and I think people like our discussions about it, because otherwise they just read the book and they wouldn't watch any discussions on the video, right? So I think that the reason they're here watching the videos is to hear our digressions and to hear our input on what we have been reading. So
and sometimes we're just, in this age, we're also self-entitled that we like to hear ourselves talk. And so it's good to stay humble and to just be in service. And so it's really been delightful to do this with you, man. And I'm so grateful. And thank you, Carl Jung, for giving us this amazing stuff. And thanks for sharing this journey with me, and to be continued.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but I think it worked out anyway.
Yeah, no, it was okay. It was okay. I think we all missed you for a little bit. So Feel the Link is your page, your page, your video channel. And then I'm the Healer and the Dreamer, MC Starman, Luke Randa. We're over and out. Whoop,
Yeah.
whoop, whoop. All right.